Today on TFL Bike, we are kicking off the first ever TFL Ride podcast. So this is a big step for us.
Yeah, this is going to be a long episode, and Roman has kind of thrown us into the deep end here, and we're doing a podcast now, so we're stoked about it.
I've done 2 podcasts for our other channels, but you've never really wanted to do a podcast.
No, I've edited enough podcasts for the car and truck channels that I didn't really ever want to do one, but I'm happy to talk about bikes. I just don't want to sit here and talk about cars for an hour, but that's not what we're doing here. It's all about motorcycles, so I'm happy to be here.
Also, behind the scenes, Alex doesn't really like doing this kind of thing because what you don't know is that almost every time you see Alex say something, he said the same thing or started to say the same thing like 5 times before he actually said it.
Yeah, it's pretty true. I just got back from the MT-10 press ride in North Carolina, and we'll go into that a little bit, but I think I came back with like 3 hours of helmet footage.
Yeah.
And, every single clip, it was the same order, the same stand-ups every time. I think I said, hey, welcome to the full review of the MT-10 like a dozen times in my helmet. So, yeah, you don't see all the cuts in the background, but that's why I've been terrified of doing podcasts, is because I make a lot of mistakes here on camera.
But
and you can edit those out in a short video.
We're not doing that.
We're not doing edits in this one, so you'll have to bear with me as I mess up all the way through this podcast.
So, what we're going to be talking about here are trips that we've both done to ride motorcycles that are just starting to be released. I mean, they're not really hitting dealers yet, but we're talking about the new Ducati DesertX, which I rode out here in Colorado, just a couple hours away from our home base here in Boulder. And we're also going to be talking about Alex on the MT-10.
Yeah, both wildly different bikes, honestly, but both brand new bikes that a lot of people have been excited about, both pretty popular bikes that had a lot of hype around them. So I'm excited to hear your thoughts on the DesertX, and I'm pretty jealous you got to take it for a ride up in Aspen. It's a pretty cool place.
It was really cool. A lot of these trips are honestly just very cool. The manufacturers want to make a good impression when they come out with a new vehicle, so you usually end up in a pretty scenic spot with nice places to ride, and this was no exception. So we were in Snowmass, Colorado. We rode through a lot of the off-road trails around that area, and really, really beautiful place and just a really cool bike to be on. So the DesertX, 110 horsepower, 68 pound-feet of torque. It's got about 9 inches of suspension travel in the front and 8.6 inches in the rear, 9.8 inches of ground clearance. And the ones that we were riding had beefed up skid plates, side protection. It had a guard over the radiator. It had beefier hand guards. So they were set up to off-road. Although it was running the standard tire for the bike, you have the option from the factory to get either a more aggressive off-road tire or a more street-oriented tire. But this was the middle-of-the-road tire because we were riding both on-road and off-road. And yeah, the bike was just awesome.
Yeah, you got some really good shots on that program. It looks like a super fun bike. It looks like a big bike, though, looking from the front of it. I mean, you know this, I'm kind of terrified of big bikes. Not terrified, but I prefer a smaller, lightweight sort of package. How did it feel in terms of weight, kind of off-road on an unfamiliar bike?
It's 445 pounds dry, which is not an insane amount of weight. And even at 5'10", I was able to flat foot the bike. So the seat height is 34.4, but one thing that Ducati talked about on this bike, and they've also talked about it on other bikes, like when I went on the Monster launch for the new Monster, they talked about the same thing, inner leg curve. So the bike is not super wide, so even with a 34.4 inch seat height, I could flat foot the bike at 5'10". So it's really not that hard. It doesn't feel that difficult to manage. And I mean, 445 pounds is a lot heavier than a dirt bike. So off-road, you notice the weight for sure, but it's also not nearly as heavy as plenty of the other ADVs.
It looks heavier. I would have
Yeah.
thought it's over 500 pounds just looking at the bike, but
yeah, and like a lot of the 1200 ADVs are.
Yeah.
So those off-road can start to feel a little bit like a handful, especially on steep terrain. And most of what we were riding was really pretty loose and rocky. classic
Up
Colorado.
Aspen Mountain, right?
Yeah, so we rode up and down Aspen Mountain. We also rode just a bunch of trails that were around Snowmass. No single track, but just really marbly, dry terrain. So I got very used to that bike sliding around.
Drop it at all?
I tested the crash bar very slightly. I was coming to a bottom of a hill where we were riding back and forth to get some shots. It's kind of the way that it works on these events. We actually have time to talk about some of these things now. So the way it works when you go on one of these motorcycle events is you'll be riding in a group. There's a lead rider and a follow rider that works for the manufacturer. And at certain points, scenic spots along your ride, you'll stop and they'll have photographers and videographers. And so you'll all pull off. The lead rider will go ahead and they'll say, okay, go ahead and go. And you ride ahead. And at some point as you're riding along, the photographers and videographers are stopped there. They'll get some cool looking shots for you. And then you see,
for example, something like that. That
That's
came
what that
from
is.
Ducati's media team right there.
Yeah, and then you pull up to where the lead rider is, where they went ahead to, and stop there. And then once everyone has done the same thing, you'll turn around, you'll go back and forth a couple times, and they get cool shots of you riding, which is good for us because we want video with cool looking footage. It's good for them because they want footage where their bike looks cool. So at one point, I was going and turning around for one of these off-road shots, and it was on this steep, loose, soft dirt hill. And I get to the bottom of this hill, and I had turned around there, probably 3-4 times beforehand, but now there was this Polaris RZR reversing up the trail. So I had really no exit because it was taking up like the entire trail. So I started to turn the bike and got to a point where I couldn't really turn it any further. So I stopped the bike and went to put my foot down, but it was downhill enough that the bike just leaned towards me and it was too heavy with as straight as my leg was. And it just came down at me and I kind of guided it down to the ground. And I was able to pick it back up.
Nice.
And honestly, I mean, the bike looked fine. The crash bar on the side didn't even show any marks on it. The handguard and the mirror had a couple little scuffs. This picture was before that. And I had a bunch of dirt on my leg, but otherwise it was fine.
That crash bar is an accessory, right? That's
Yeah.
not-
Crash bar is an accessory. There's an accessory radiator guard. Hand guards were an accessory. That skid plate, although it does come with a skid plate, that one is beefed up. But yeah, and at the end of the day, I mean, this isn't tough like a dirt bike. If you were to be hucking it off a 100-foot jump and just letting it land on its side, I mean, at that point you're going to break it. But with this amount of protection, if this were my bike and I didn't care about it looking pretty, I would have no problem putting it on its side. I wouldn't be worried about it breaking.
I mean, that's what adventure bikes are made to do. They're made to take, not crashes, but some small drops on the trail.
Yeah. As long as you're not really hucking it onto rocks, it's not going to take the abuse that a dirt bike would take, but it's really not bad.
Yeah. You mentioned those handguards were an accessory, and I guess this is the first time I really looked at those handguards up close in a photo. I just noticed that little clear surround that goes around them, which I think is a pretty cool design touch. My favorite part of this bike is that front end with the two round headlights and that X pattern that goes through them, and then that sort of geometric checkered pattern that goes up the windscreen. And I think those handguards just really complete the look. It's a cool looking bike. They killed the design.
The way that the bodywork wraps around the rest of it, and also the color, it's only available in that one color, white with the red and gray and black accents, and that's the only color they need to make the bike in. I'm sure down the road they'll do some special editions, or they'll probably add some colors. Maybe.
It's a Ducati. They'll do red and a different red, red and silver. That's about it.
Who knows? Maybe they'll have a carbon package for it, which would be a terrible idea for an off-road bike if you ever plan to replace any components. But yeah, honestly, it doesn't really need any other colors because it looks damn good
Yeah.
in that exact combo.
Yeah. Sweet looking bike. What else can you tell me about it? Any other sort of standout?
Oh man, there's so
points of
much
your
about
trip?
it. Yeah, ergonomics were nice. It was a comfortable bike to stand up on, a good tank to pinch with your knees.
How long was your ride? How many hours? Miles?
Oh, we started at like 8:30 in the morning and ended at about 5 in the afternoon.
And you felt good all day on it?
Yeah, I mean, the bike got hot,
Yeah.
as Ducatis do. Yeah, the bike was very warm. and-
L-twin? Is it an L-twin?
Yeah, and 937cc Tesla Strata engine is pretty much the same motor that's in the new Monster and in like the Multistrada V2, but they changed the gear ratios around because it's supposed to be more of an off-road bike. Yeah, the sun was really intense out there. We were at very high elevation. I mean, elevation that makes where we live here in Boulder, Colorado look like nothing.
Yeah, like 13,000 feet or something
so
like
yeah,
that.
by the end of the day, I was pretty tired.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, the bike was very comfortable. At 160 pounds, I don't usually compress properly the suspension on a lot of bikes out there, especially big baggers and cruisers. This felt like a bike that was perfectly sprung for me. And there's adjustment there. There's preload adjustment. If you weigh more than me, you can still set it up for your weight, but bike felt so good. I mean, we were jumping some of these berms and the landings were just so plush. Nice amount of power. Really impressive electronics for letting you slide the bike around a little bit, but if you want more intervention, you can have the bike keep you in a more manageable setting where it lets you slide around but not too far. So it's a pretty approachable bike for someone like me who's not really a dirt rider. And yeah, nice amount of power for riding on the street. Fun to carve around on pavement, although it's very soft suspension. So that's, it doesn't carve like a sport bike.
Yeah.
It also doesn't off-road like a dirt bike. But I think it's kind of that perfect middle ground that you would want from an ADV that you're going to ride on both surfaces.
It's funny you say that about the suspension. I think that's kind of the Italian way a little bit. I remember you getting back from this trip and saying that, you felt really good with the suspension on the bike and that Ducati said it was sprung for someone right about around your weight.
Yeah.
And I remember when we picked up that Aprilia Touareg, it was kind of the same thing. Roman wanted it adjusted to his weight, and no digs at Roman here, but they weren't really able to get it super close to where he wanted it.
Yeah.
So I think it's just kind of an Italian thing. Italians tend to be pretty slim and
They're like our size.
yeah, exactly. They're tiny. So it makes sense that the bikes that come out of that country are sprung for a lightweight rider.
Yeah.
So
No,
yeah, if you're a super heavy guy, you'll probably need to throw a new rear shock at this, maybe respring the front, but
Yeah.
what are you going to do?
I mean, cons with this particular bike, I would say it's very expensive. $17,095 in the U.S. market, which is a lot of money to spend on a bike that you're probably going to end up putting on the ground multiple times if you're actually riding it the way that it's intended to be ridden. If 17 grand is nothing to you for a bike that you're planning to put on the ground, then yeah, there's not really a lot to dislike about it. Bike gets really, really, definitely pretty warm.
How's the sound?
It sounds pretty good. I mean, the pipe is pretty quiet from the factory, but it's got some good induction noise. I liked it. Yeah, a lot of good to say about it. But yeah, it's just kind of a lot of money for a bike that you're going to put on the ground. And especially because if I was to get something like this, I would have to have one to actually ride the wheels off of, and then I would also have to have another one
Second one to look pretty in the garage.
pretty, right?
Yeah,
so
that's-
realistically, it's going to be $34,000.
Right. That's the problem I had with that Ducati Scrambler desert sled we have, which it was the same thing. It looked like it could go off-road, but if you threw that thing on the ground, it's it's a metal tank. I don't know what the tank material is on this, whether it's plastic or metal, but yeah, you feel bad about throwing something that expensive and that beautiful on the ground. And I would feel the same way about this bike. I mean, I know you can drop a lot more cash on an adventure bike than $17,000, and people
For
do,
sure.
and people beat them up real bad. But me personally, I would have a hard time with that. That's why we just bought a TW200, because it's,
because we don't care.
Yeah. I mean, that
We
thing
don't care
hit the
about
ground the first time we started riding it, and it hit the ground a few times. We had no problems hooking a tow rope up to it, dragging it backwards.
Yeah.
If it hit the ground while we were towing it,
You wouldn't
didn't
do that
matter.
with this.
No, you would not do that with this. So, yeah, I mean, I like affordable adventure bikes, cheap dirt bikes for the kind of riding we do around here. But also, there's a big reliability thing that goes into that too.
Yeah.
If you're doing a cross-country trip and you want to hit, every trail from the East Coast to the West Coast, TW200 might not be the move.
Yeah.
You probably want something a little newer, and used bike prices are crazy right now. You're not going to find a GS or a DesertX for much cheaper than they retail for.
No. And also going back to the Scrambler comparison, I will say for this bike, its components are a lot more serious for off-roading. This is much more of an off-road bike than the Scrambler. Similar problem with the Scrambler in that it's a nice, pretty, and expensive bike, so you don't really want to chuck it on the ground. But if you want to ride this hard off-road, you absolutely can.
Yeah. Oh, and people will. People did with the Desert
yeah.
X too. I don't know. Yami knew
the Scrambler?
yeah. What did I just say? Desert
Desert X.
Yeah, with the Desert Sled. They've got
Yeah.
similar names. There's a YouTuber, Yami Noob, and he rode the wheels off of that thing. It hit the ground many, many times. But yeah, your resale value is not going to be the same, and that's something we care about here. So.
And also, for me, a big part of the reason I like this bike is because I love the way that it looks.
Yeah.
And I think with some healthy battle scars on it, I would like the way it looks even more. But if you were cracking the fairings and, if it was really ugly, that would be a bummer, because the way this bike looks is a big part of the reason that I like it.
Yeah.
Personally, this is my favorite looking ADV that is out there. The Norden 901, also a really good looking bike.
It's a similar look.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people hate the Pan Am. I like the way that the Pan Am looks. There's other ADVs out there that I like. This is my favorite.
Yeah, too many of them have a beak nose on them. I know we've talked about that before.
That's not my style.
Like the Multistrada, the Tracer, it's not really an ADV, it's more of a sport tourer. But a lot of these bigger, fast bikes that can go on-road and off-road and are not amazing at either one of those things, they all have beak noses. So to see something sort of with a retro vibe in the front end a little bit, it's a nice change. It's fresh.
Yeah, it is. It's really nice. Hopefully we'll get one out here and you can try your hand at it, because I think you would like it a lot.
I saw it in person. We went to that reveal event where we did an interview there with the CEO of Ducati, and once again, I loved the look of it. But yeah, I'd love to throw my leg over it, take it out on some trails here, run it through Andre's pit over the logs and stuff. I think that'd be a blast. So we'll work on that, see if we can get one here.
Yeah. Absolutely. So should we transition to talking about
should we
your
pivot
MT-10?
to your favorite thing in the world, sport bikes?
Yeah, I love fast motorcycles.
So, pretty much, what was that, the week before you went on this trip for Ducati?
Similar timing.
I went to North Carolina. We stayed in Asheville, and we were there for the new 2022 Yamaha MT-10. Should I pull a picture up of the bike?
Sure.
So people know what we're talking about here?
Might as well. Even though it's not my favorite looking motorcycle.
It's got a weird look. I said that in my review, and you can go watch the full video. It went up on TFL Bike a couple days ago. But
it has eyebrows.
Yeah, people either hated or loved the look of the last generation, and I said it was going to be the same thing with this one. And it's a Yamaha thing this year. They're not doing a great job with their front ends.
I love the colors.
Yeah, the colors are awesome, and even that a lot of people have some differing opinions on. But
I think the colors look super cool. That reddish or orangish block on the rear wheel. Watching video, especially in slow-mo, of that block flying around, looked really cool. They've also done some really cool things, like with the intake in terms of functional design.
Yeah, so basically what this bike got for this year, it was the first time the MT-10's gotten a major refresh since it was first introduced. So we talked about the look. It obviously got a new color scheme to match the rest of the bikes in that MT lineup. New headlight, some new, different design bits around the bike, new tail section. Got a new tech package, which I'll go into in a little bit. And then just some minor improvements all the way around the bike. So Case mentioned those intake vents. Those are one of my favorite features of this new bike. So if we look kind of in this area right here, the previous MT-10 had those same design elements there, but they weren't actually functional. These are actually now functional air intakes. So they're letting air in, and then you can kind of see up on the top of the tank right there, there's these two little black ports that come out of the top of the tank with a mesh vent on them. And they're just piping sound at the riders. So basically, instead of getting all that intake noise pushed out of the exhaust, it's coming right to you as a rider. And it really does sound incredible. I think with the CP4 has already been a really good sounding engine. Now you just get a little more of that growl noise in there. And yeah, they worked some magic there with those intake vents.
And for clarification, not fake noise being produced. It's
the
real noise. They're
real
just
intake
making a
noise.
channel for you to actually be able to hear it and interact with it.
Yeah, it's super, super cool. And I was talking to one of the Yamaha guys about it. First of all, the Yamaha logo being a tuning fork, I mean, it kind of makes sense that they care about sound. But also, they started making pianos and they started making musical instruments. So it makes sense that out of all the motorcycle brands, they really care about sound.
Yeah, they make some of the best sounding bikes.
Yeah, especially with the stock exhaust.
Yeah.
I was blown away with how good this bike sounded with the factory exhaust and no work done to it. It sounded really good.
And think about a bike like, like an MT-07, the CP2. There are so many other motorcycles out there that have a side-by-side twin. Not a single one of them sounds as good as a CP2. Not even close.
We have one sitting in our office right now. We have a Honda CB 500.
Yeah.
What is it? 500R.
CBR 500R.
Yeah, it does not sound anywhere nearly as good as a CP2.
That cross-plane side-by-side twin sounds so much better than any other side-by-side twin I've ever heard.
Same engine that's in the R7, the Tenere 700, if you're curious.
Yeah, FZ07 back in the day.
FZ07. But yeah, so sound is a big thing on this new bike. They really kind of improved the sound.
What's the power?
Power is 160 horsepower and 82 foot-pounds of torque.
That'll move you.
Yeah, and those aren't numbers that Yamaha actually puts out there. That's according to published reports for the last generation MT-10. And one of the reasons they had to refresh this bike, can you guess? Euro 5?
Euro 5, yeah.
So basically, Yamaha told me they wanted to keep the same power and torque numbers and still be able to sell the bike in all markets. So them saying that, you could pretty clearly guess that power is going to be 160 and 82 foot-pounds of torque based on the last generation figures. So yeah, really powerful bike. And
do you remember what it weighs?
It's 467 pounds.
Okay.
Wet.
So I mean, yeah, it's not a lightweight bike, but considering the power output, it's on par.
Yeah, and actually, like I said earlier, I prefer a lightweight flickable motorcycle. This felt really lightweight. It's actually got the same exact wheelbase as a Yamaha R1. The frame and the swing arm are identical. And the wheelbase on this is shorter than the new MT-09. So even though you've got more weight on this bike and a bigger motor, I think because of that shorter wheelbase, you still have that same flickable feeling on it.
Yeah.
We were on some tight roads. Go watch that video. It was a really tight, switchy road, really good twisties, and it did not feel like a big beastly bike.
Now, you've spent a lot of time on a lot of Yamahas, so I want to get your input on how this stacks up to other bikes like the MT-09, XSR 900, a few others out there. But before we dig into that, I want to talk more about the way that this bike looks. And so we mentioned the eyebrows, little weird.
Yep.
Not my favorite. A lot of people feel a similar kind of way. The other issue that I have with it is that if you're going to give a motorcycle eyes and eyebrows, so make it very anthropomorphic, make it, I think I'm using that right, make it kind of resembling a human face almost, then don't do the separate low beam, high beam, so that only one of the eyeballs is open when it's going down the road.
It has an eye patch.
Yeah, I'm generally not a fan of having asymmetric high and low beams, because a lot of times it just looks like one of your lights is burned out. But yeah, if you're going to make your bike look like it has a face, then especially don't cover one of its eyes by having it turned off.
Yeah, one of the other journalists on this trip asked at the presentation, so on these trips, basically you fly in, you go to dinner one night, and they give you a presentation on the vehicle before you go out and ride it the next day. And at the presentation that night, they told us that it had this sort of Cyclops look where only one light was on at a time.
Except the Cyclops only has one eye. A Cyclops
eye patch look. It's got the eye patch look. So anyway, one of the journalists asked why they did that, and they said it's to separate this from the rest of the MT bikes as the flagship model. None of the other MT bikes do this, so this one has a special feature. I thought that was kind of BS. It didn't seem like a real answer to that question. No.
Because then if you want to separate it from the other MT models, then why are you giving it basically the exact same colorway as the 07 and the 09?
Yeah, and the same naming scheme and everything. So yeah, it's a little bit of a weird answer, but I agree. I don't like the off balance look in the front whatsoever. No. It's a little weird, but it is a very similar looking bike to the last MT-10. So if you liked that last one, you're probably gonna like this one.
Right.
If you didn't like that one, you're probably not gonna like this one. One thing I do like that they did. See this little black triangle right there? So on the previous MT-10, they had like a sort of side fairing that went on there. And now they just kind of covered that up with a piece of plastic. And I think that kind of cleans up the look of the bike a little bit. It makes it look more like a naked bike instead of a sport bike, which I like.
Sure. I mean, look, to me, all of these bikes look pretty similar. There's just this big mess of components all in the middle, and it looks like it's too fast and too aggressive. It's just not my style.
I mean, it is too fast and too aggressive.
You know what is my style?
What is?
Is another Yamaha that you rode relatively recently, is the XSR 900. So how would something like this MT-10 stack up to either the new MT-09 or XSR 900?
You know, they actually felt surprisingly similar. I think for a lot of people, that decision on what should I get, the MT-09, the MT-10, the XSR 900, because I think these bikes are cross-shopped a lot. I cross-shop them. I think most of it comes down to looks. They're both anything with the CP3 or a CP4 has plenty enough power for the street. You don't need more than even a CP2 for the street.
Which I'm sure some people are going to call you soft for saying that, but realistically, it's true.
You don't need it. I own a CP3, and even I'm saying that, and I want after going on this, I want one of these. You don't need it though. It's unnecessary. I think the biggest thing with them is on the previous gen MT-10, I think I was a little afraid of that bike because of the lack of technology on it. It's so much power, and you have that in the back of your mind the whole time you're riding, that you're on this crazy powerful 160 horsepower motorcycle, and if you're on a little bit of a wet road with too much throttle, it's just going to throw you sideways. So I think before they revised this MT-10, it was a clear choice. Get the MT-09 or the XSR 900 because they've got the tech package, and for the money you might as well get something that has the latest and greatest in terms of tech. Now this has all that, so I think it's a much more manageable, a much more approachable bike. So yeah, I really didn't see a huge walkaway between either bike. I mean, if it were my money, I think I'd get the XSR. I just love the look of that bike.
Yeah, even I like the way that bike looks.
There's very few bikes, the two of us are in agreement, that look good. But they're both crazy powerful Yamahas. They're both super fast street bikes that are a ton of fun. So in terms of how they ride, they're not all that crazy different. The sound that comes out of them is very different. So you have that really growly, deep, throaty noise coming out of the MT-10, and the CP3, you get more of that whiny noise. I always thought it kind of sounds supercharged. I think for a lot of people, it comes down to the sound and the look of the bike.
Yeah, and I think, for me at least, the XSR looks-wise is a clear winner.
I think what they need to do is an XSR1 or an XSR10.
XSR 1000?
Yeah. That'd be cool.
That would be cool. That would be very cool. That's something that I could get behind because, again, I like old school bikes. I like retro bikes. And, XSR, really, really pretty. Love that. This is just... Could you imagine me riding this?
No, not at all.
No, it's just not...
Yeah,
Not my thing.
it's funny that in the same year, Yamaha has put out a new bike with such a cool design and a super round retro headlight, and then like 2 months later they come out with this, and
Which is different than
yeah,
that.
and I don't think it looks bad from this angle. It's when you look at it directly from the side and you see the whole headlight assembly like sticking out from the bike. The Triumphs have this same
Yeah.
look where
Is it the speed triple?
it's both the Speed and the Street Triple have that like bug eye look where I don't know, it just seems like they made a motorcycle and then they were like, oh crap, we need to put a headlight on this, and they were like, we'll just build it up to the front forks.
Yeah, pull up a picture
Yeah.
of a speed triple, because it is that same thing. You look at it from the side, and well, the shape of the headlights makes it look like it was pulled directly off of an insect, but also look at all the gap between the forks and where the headlights begin. Why does it stick so far forward? 'Cause the rest of that bike actually isn't bad looking. Oh yeah, there's a side view down there. Oh.
You
Oh
see
my
one?
God.
Yeah, there we go.
There we go. Oh, you messed it up though. Yeah. So similar thing. There's just a big obvious gap
Yeah, like
between
you can
the whole
see-
headlight assembly.
Anytime you can
the
see
fork.
light between your dash and, I don't
Yeah.
know. There's
It
just
just doesn't look right.
there's a lot going on there. One thing that was cool though, is this windscreen is blacked out on the bike from the factory, but they had an accessory or an accessorized bike there, which they do a lot on these trips. They'll, park one inside the hotel or something that has saddlebags and all kinds of accessories mounted up to it, just to show you what's possible. And the accessory bike they had there had a clear windscreen on the front of it. And granted, this was a tall, like touring windscreen that I thought was pretty hideous. But behind the windscreen, there's some cool mesh details and stuff that you don't see on the stock bike. You got to pull that windscreen off and put a clear one on to see it. But I think if they made like a short, which they might, I don't know if they make this, but if they made a short windscreen that's clear, it kind of shows off some more details, and I think looks pretty cool.
It's like an Easter egg.
Yeah. But
Also,
anyway, the tech was cool.
What's going on directly below the headlights? Is that like a steering stabilizer
Yeah,
and
exactly.
some wires
Steering
and the horn?
damper, horn.
Why
brake
is that?
lines.
Why is that the most prominent thing to me at the
Yeah.
front of this bike?
These headlights are tiny, so it kind of makes the horn look pretty huge. But yeah, I loved the tech on it. One of the things I did on this bike was it's got 4 different preset power or preset riding modes, A, B, C, and D, A being the most aggressive. It was raining the night before we went out on this ride. So what I did is I threw it in C mode, but bumped my power from level 3 to level 2. So I basically got B mode power, but with all the traction control and wheelie control and slide control of C mode. And I love that customizability. It made me really confident and just, I don't know, it made me feel right at home on the bike, knowing that I was riding wet roads. I could go pretty fast, have really good power, but still all the things to save my butt. The one crazy thing I want to get your opinion on is one of the new features they put on this bike, which every journalist on this program had strong feelings on in a negative way. There's a speed limiter on it. So it has cruise control. You hit cruise control on, you tap cruise control again, and this little black box comes up on the screen that says LIM. You set your max speed. I set it to, I think, like 39 miles per hour on this ride. I was in second gear, full throttle, and it wouldn't let me go anywhere. So the whole idea is that you're on a crazy powerful bike and maybe you don't have the self-control to not do double the speed limit. You can set the speed limit to 55 on a 50-mile-an-hour road, and the bike won't let you go past 55. So
Yeah, I would never use that.
yeah, I mean, I think if you're riding a motorcycle, your brain you're tuned into riding a motorcycle. If you're speeding, you know you're speeding. Like,
Yeah. I'm the type of person that sees a service light on a motorcycle that only the dealer can reset, and that for me is immediately walk away from it. And actually, of the 3 motorcycles I own, not a single one of them even has a speedometer.
yeah.
So, I can appreciate technology and what it does on newer bikes. It's really, really impressive, even coming from the least tech-savvy person at our entire company, now at least. But yeah, it's that kind of thing. To me especially, it's not appealing. I would never buy a motorcycle with this much horsepower to tell myself not to go more than
Yeah, to me that
75,
seems like the kind of thing where basically this bike has a new ride-by-wire throttle. So it doesn't have throttle cables. It uses a sensor in the grip. So to me it feels like one of those things that they were like, oh, we have this new technology. What else can we do with it? What
Let's just
more?
make a feature.
Let's make a feature that no one needs. So yeah, I mean, it was cool to try. It was something I had to try. It was a weird feeling being in second gear
You just
on an
twist and
R1
throttle,
motor
it
and
won't
you're
do anything.
pinned and it won't go anywhere.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if you don't want to get speeding tickets, just don't buy an MT-10.
Yeah.
It's probably the better
Exactly.
solution.
Buy a Grom.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So a really, really cool bike.
Oh, and the SP. I forgot to bring in the SP here too. So you can get Olin suspension and a fancy paint scheme on a MT-10 for the first time.
Speaking of, how much are these?
14 grand for the one you see there, 16.9 for the SP version. So right
Okay.
about 17 grand, which I think is pretty reasonable.
Yeah.
I mean, like you said, 17 grand, 14 for this one. That's a lot of money for any two-wheeled machine.
How much is the XSR 900?
I want to say it's 12 grand, 11
Sold.
grand.
Although that is a lot of extra power for another, 2-3 grand.
Yeah.
But yeah. Is
10
the
grand.
XSR?
XSR is 10 grand, which is a pretty screaming deal.
It's 10 grand?
It's 10 grand.
Yeah, sold.
Yeah.
I'd much rather.
I don't know. When you compare this to some of the other offerings that are out there, though, like, yes, this is a Japanese bike. That's why it's more affordable. But you could spend this kind of money on like an S1000R or, you know,
That's true.
why am I blanking on the Street Fighter, Ducati Street Fighter?
Right.
So there's plenty of naked bikes out there that you can spend a lot more money on. And now that you can get a $17,000 option with electronically controlled suspension, and a really cool look. I think the SP version of this bike does look really, really good. I think that's a pretty good value.
Yeah.
So-
I mean, if what you want out of a motorcycle is speed and a lot of it, this is a really good option. But yeah, sounds a little scary to me. Oh,
There's
yeah.
the SP.
There's the SP.
So gold forks. It's got like that R1M
Right.
kind of paint scheme, but similar bike. It's got a belly pan on it too.
Yeah, I don't like the colorway as much, but I mean, having Olin suspension is always a plus.
Well, you're wrong. That colorway is sick.
This one?
Yes.
You like that better than the other?
I like that a lot, but I've always just kind of been jealous of the Europeans that they've gotten the SP bikes. And
Right.
they've always been in this color, so I think that's just, I don't know. I like gold forks too, so
Yeah, I do too. I do like gold forks. It's just the rest of it is
it's very
I don't know,
Yamaha.
a little bit less
Very
colorful.
classic Yamaha.
Yeah. So, since we were talking a little bit about how these press trips work, while we have a little bit of time still, I want to talk about kind of how this works, what we do, because our company is primarily automotive, and coming into the motorcycle world, I think there's a number of people that don't really they don't know what our relationship with the manufacturers is. I'd love to do a full video about this at some point, but
Yeah, we could talk about it a little here though.
while we're here in this podcast setting and we kind of have the time to deep dive into things, I think it's worth mentioning basically the way this works. So what we do is like moto journalism. On the car and truck side is automotive journalism. So we work with the manufacturers to get access to these vehicles, but we don't take any money ever from the manufacturers. So there's basically a
They
relationship.
take a lot of our money.
Yeah, because we end up buying a lot of the things
Yeah.
that we test. So basically the way that it works is they allow us access to the vehicles, we film them, we talk about what's good, what's not so good, and then that way the consumer, like you guys, can kind of get an idea of why they might like or dislike a certain product.
So yeah, we don't take
that's-
any money from the manufacturers. I want you said we get access to these different vehicles, so let's talk about how we get access to them, I guess. A few different ways. First way we talked about this whole podcast is actually flying out and going to a press trip where there's anywhere between 5 and 15 journalists there to ride identical motorcycles all on a big group ride together. The other way is long-term loans. So right now we've got 2. We have a Grom and a CBR 500R that we picked up from Honda. So we'll either say, hey, Honda, we're in LA shooting this video. We'll have a trailer. Can we pick up 2 bikes, bring them back to Colorado? Or they'll just put them on a trailer and ship them out here to us. And then there's a third way too, I guess, which is we'll be in LA for, like Case said, we have all kinds of car and truck shoots. Sometimes we'll extend a day, or we're there early, or we have a day with nothing to do. So most of the press fleets are based, at least for motorcycles, in the LA area.
They have motorcycles that are specifically for people to ride them and review them.
Right.
Primarily on the west coast, like in California, where the weather is good.
So if you go on our YouTube channel and look up picking up the Honda Grom and the CBR 500R, you'll actually see the facility. And a lot of people thought that was a dealership. It's not. That was
Honda Corporate's actual facility. They don't sell bikes out
that's
of
where
there.
all the press bikes go. That's where they come back after loans. They service them, and then they ship them back out.
Yeah, that was the garage and the motorcycles that belong to Honda Motor Company, not Honda of whatever area.
So all the manufacturers pretty much have a facility like that somewhere in the LA area, and we'll tell them, hey, we'll be here this day. What motorcycles do you have in the shop for us to take out just for the day? And we'll do a review like that. We actually did a trip once to LA where we kind of stayed for the whole week and just got an Airbnb and lined up a bunch of different bikes. So we don't take money, but
and there is a degree to which, so I've seen plenty of times, we've both seen the comment that you guys are working with these manufacturers, they're flying you out to these locations and giving you access to motorcycles, so you're not able to give an honest opinion on them. But what we do has existed for a long time, and the manufacturers respect the fact that if there are good things, we'll talk about those, and if there are bad things, we'll talk about those. There is a degree to which you can't absolutely ream a motorcycle and then expect them to want to invite you back. But honestly, at this point, there really aren't any motorcycles out there that are so bad, so poorly built, or so horrible to ride. Well, yeah, I guess that's debatable. From most of the major manufacturers, there really aren't motorcycles out there that you need to ream, because even if there's a bike that like Alex wouldn't buy or I wouldn't buy, which is honestly most of them, at the end of the day, there's an ass for every seat. So if I were reviewing something like this, which is a fast, expensive bike, it totally would not suit me. But I wouldn't ream the bike for not being the kind of bike that I would want, because there are plenty of people out there that want that exact kind of thing, like Alex.
Yeah, or like that R18 we had in the office for a while. I would never buy one of those, but I did appreciate how gorgeous it was and the build quality on it. So yeah, all these legacy, I say legacy as in the manufacturers that have been around.
Yeah.
They've been making motorcycles long enough. They know what to do and what not to do on a new model so that it's not a complete and total failure. Some of the newer electric companies aren't so good at that. But
there's really no need to ream a motorcycle that's coming out. So the idea that we can't make a good video on or a good review about a bike because we work with the manufacturer to get access to them is, at the end of the day, just not true. We can still give our honest opinion on something without having to be unfair to the bike, because you kind of gotta...
we're motorcycle people. I've owned like motorcycles from at least all 4 of the big Japanese brands and multiple of each of them. So yeah, I don't think there's not a whole lot you can... I know people out there are going to say that we favor one brand or another, but
and I mean, at the end of the day, we're humans, we're consumers. There are bikes that for ourselves, we would rather buy than others. But again, I mean, we try to approach everything with the mindset of what are the good things about this bike? Why might somebody be interested in it? What are you going to like about it? And then what are the obvious flaws to it? Because every motorcycle has some kind of flaw to it. There is no perfect motorcycle with absolutely nothing wrong with it. So in every video, we try to make sure to say at least one thing about the bike that isn't great. every once in a while you're on a bike and it's so overwhelmingly fun that it can be hard to come up with something good. And so I can think of plenty of times where you and where I have done a review on a bike and we're racking our brains over like, what's the bad thing about this bike? I got to say something bad about it, because this review can't be so overwhelmingly positive, because then people are going to be like, oh, you're being paid. So yeah, always try and find something bad about it. But yeah, but there's just a lot of good motorcycles out there.
Yeah, there's a ton of good motorcycles.
Yeah, so it's honestly, at the end of the day, pretty easy to work with these manufacturers and make videos about these bikes without having to strain that relationship, because most of these bikes are pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, we haven't had a bad bike roll through here in a long time.
No, I mean, not really.
Yeah. So there you go.
We've had some poorly maintained bikes roll through here.
Yes, we have. We won't go into the details on that, because that can happen with any motorcycle. It's not who built it, it's who's taking care of it. But
yeah, absolutely. Well, and also the press bikes get ridden and used pretty
they're
hard.
worse than rental cars. It's a bunch of enthusiasts just beating the hell out of machines that they know they're never going to have to ride or worry about or pay for. So
yeah. I thought it was funny. At one point, I don't know how he even found it. My dad was looking at buying a bike out of a press fleet.
Run.
Yeah, which was unusual, because I was thinking, I don't think I've ever seen one of those for sale. But somehow he found one, and he was saying...
What was it?
It was his big FJR, his big touring bike. And he was saying, a very dad bike.
Yeah.
He was saying, it's owned by Yamaha. It's been maintained by them. This is a really good thing. And I said, Dad, that motorcycle, day one, it was ridden hard. Nobody cared to do a break-in on this bike. And if a motorcycle rolls by our office and it has 50 miles on the odometer, we're not going to do a break-in for them and not take it to full throttle.
No, we're reviewing the bike. I mean, we're going to ride. On
average, we have a week with the bike. So we're going to ride it.
Yeah. And most of the time, the manufacturers break them in before they put them out in the fleet.
Enough of it.
Yeah. But this I think the MT-10 trip, I think that bike had like 200 some miles on it when I got on it. So
that's not bad.
Yeah, I mean, that's not fully broken in,
but
depending on who you ask. But
better than some we've ridden.
Yeah.
We've definitely ridden bikes that had less than 100 miles on the clock.
Yeah.
And it's funny, sometimes people in the comments will see that and they'll be like, oh my God, you shouldn't be revving that so hard.
Yeah. Trust me, I would love to spend my entire week and my entire workday riding and breaking in motorcycles.
It's just not an option.
Yeah, we can't do that.
We don't have that kind of time. YouTube videos don't make that much money.
Yeah, believe it or not.
Yeah, so that's kind of the gist of how this relationship works. Let us know down in the comments below if you have any more questions about that kind of thing. We would be happy to do a full-length video answering some of your questions about how this job works and what we do, because we don't want to be misleading. We want people to understand what it is that we're trying to do and trying to put out there. We want to be properly understood. So yeah, let us know down in the comments below if you guys have any particular questions. That was just kind of a quick overview of how our job works. We could spend any amount of time talking about it, really.
Like you said, we could do a whole episode on that if you guys are interested enough in it, but...
Yeah.
To me, that sounds a little boring, but that's just because that's what we do all day. But
yeah, who knows? Maybe people are interested in the nitty-gritty of how it works to be in the moto journalism field.
Yeah.
All likelihood, probably nobody really cares.
Exactly. Anyway, we're gonna wrap this episode up. There you have it, the first ever TFL Ride episode.
Yeah. How do you wrap up a podcast?
I don't know.
I think when Tommy and I did a podcast talking about a trip that he did, and we sort of wrapped up the podcast by talking about what is the best shape and cut of fry, and we also talked about oat milk versus regular milk. But I don't think that's how most of our podcasts end.
I don't
think
think
that
so.
was a unique situation.
Yeah.
So I guess we could just end it.
Yeah, we'll just end it. I don't want to go into French fry talk today.
Yeah, not again.
I know we're in agreement on our French fries.
Yeah, we know what's up. Tommy is weird.
So
Tommy
let us know down in the comments what you think the best French fries are.
What's the best cut of fry?
Yeah.
Tommy likes McDonald's fries. That's his top tier. I said waffle fries.
Yeah, waffle
Yeah.
fries are where it's at.
Yeah, waffle fries are where it's at.
Anyway,
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there goes the first episode of TFL Ride. Tune in. I guess
next
we're doing
week,
this weekly.
Yeah,
So
we'll have one of these every week, and let us know if you have any specific topics.
topics.
That's the
Yeah.
word. Topics down in the comments below.
That was
we'll
like
be
your
sure
only
to.
mess up. the whole
Oh,
time.
I stumbled over my words plenty in this episode. I'll get better at it, so stay tuned. We'll see you in the next one.